It's a beautiful Thursday morning here in Lagos. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the program. I am Nifemi Oguntoye. Now, the Malabu oil deal is considered perhaps the most controversial deal in the new millennium. And a lot seemed to have happened between 1998 and 2017 that we cannot exhaust during this program. But let me attempt to summarize it for you. There's an oil field in the Niger Delta that is popularly referred to as the OPL 245. It's considered the richest oil block in the Niger Delta, and not only in Nigeria but in the Gulf of Guinea. It's said to have about 9 billion barrels of oil and enormous gas in reserves. That is enough to power the whole African continent for 7 years non-stop. And that sounds too good to be true, but we're talking about a field that is worth $500 billion here. In 1998, under the regime of General Sani Abacha, the oil prospecting license was then initially given to Malabu Oil and Gas Limited. It was revoked 3 years later by former President Olusegun Obasanjo in 2001, and that same year he awarded it to Shell without a public bid rather. In 2006, it was revoked again and returned to Malabu following an out-of-court settlement that was after Malabu had appealed the National Assembly and also challenged the government's decision in court. Things went quiet then until former President Goodluck Jonathan now had to finally restore the block to Malabu. That was in 2010. And a year after, perhaps the most controversial in this deal was when President Jonathan approved Malabu's resale of the OPL to Shell and ENI. Now, the $1.1 billion in between Malabu, Shell, ENI, and actors in the federal government serving as negotiators has now become perhaps the basis of many litigations that we have in different courts in Nigeria and even outside the country. AFCC revisited the case in 2017, and just like you know, just yesterday, it secured a court order for the arrest of a former petroleum minister as well as a former minister of justice. So 20 years on, and the puzzle is yet to be solved. Let me introduce my guest to you. Lanre Suraj has been a key voice in all of this. He had a statement when a Nigerian and his associate were jailed in Italy last year over this issue. He's chairman and chairman Civil Society Network Against Corruption. Thank you very much for finding time to join us today.
Thank you.
Libros Oshoma is a perhaps we should call you a celebrity lawyer right now. A public affairs analyst. Thank you for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
So there are too many questions about the Malabu matter. We have been awarding oil blocks for 60 years. Why is the OPL 245 special? Remember that there was OPL 246 awarded to South Atlantic Petroleum. I don't want to mention the owner here. But it was not revoked and it was not re-awarded. Let me begin with you. So why is OPL 245 full of so much trouble?
Okay, thank you. I think the story of OPL 245 is still going to eventually make an epic movie. You know, that is only when you can understand the gamut. It's not something that can actually be told in just an ordinary book as well. It's a story that I would have to go a very long way. So why the OPL 245 and 246 are different? They are almost similar. But the unfortunate aspect of 245 was that it was issued to a company called Malabu, which was registered and owned by Danny Tete, who was a sitting minister, the son of Abacha, Mohamed Abacha, and another person. Those are the three people that actually were behind Malabu. 245 was actually issued to Danjuma. The unfortunate aspect...
You meant 246?
246, rather. So the unfortunate aspect was the fact that Danny Tete issued to both himself and the son of Abacha while he was sitting in office, which was against the Code of Conduct for Public Office Holders in the Constitution of the Federal Republic. So that makes it an illegal act. So no matter how legitimate you want to also attach to it, is the fact that you as a public officer that you can't superintend over a process that you are going to benefit from. The conflict of interest was there both for him and Abacha. Now, moving forward, when it was revoked eventually in 2001 by Obasanjo and allocated to, because Shell was to be partner to Malabu in exploiting the oil. Unfortunately, the government under Obasanjo reviewed it and said, according to the Constitution, you have actually erred in allocating this where you have an interest, and attempted to revoke it. They actually revoked it. But unfortunately, they also now reallocated it in a very crude manner that was not open to open bidding under the rules guiding the allocation of the oil. Meanwhile, also part of the challenge to Malabu was registered as a company like 2 weeks before the allocation was given to Malabu. Part of the condition for you to allocate that oil license under the special policy of the government as at that time called sole risk, that is specifically for indigenous company. For you to be qualified, you must have about $100 million worth of net value. You must have about $50 million turnover rate.
But they had international organizations.
No. It is not talking about it. So I'm going to get there to the international. So you must have international partner that must not own more than 40% of either the value or the capacity to. So all these conditions were missing in Malabu. Of course, it couldn't. You must have also cognizance of experience of operating in the oil and gas. So there's no way you have cognate experience for a company that was registered 2 weeks before it was allocated an oil block. So these were part of the consideration leading to the 2001 revocation. In 2006, when it was actually returned to Malabu, it wasn't out of court settlement. The whole was called reallocation, reactivation, and all the rest of that. It was done under Obasanjo with Shibayo Ojo as the Attorney General of the Federation and Chief Justice, and Minister of Justice. And unfortunately, very unfortunately too, Shibayo Ojo also got $10 million from the money that came from Malabu.
Allegedly?
No, not allegedly. He affirmed, he confirmed, there was evidence. He testified recently in the Milan trial that he was expecting to get $50 million as a consultant to Dan Itete on Malabu, on the sale of Malabu. So when you look at the connection of when he was the Attorney General, when Nigeria actually won in the case against Malabu, which was a case, challenging the revocation, Malabu lost. So on what basis was he given to Malabu? So there were lots of negotiation on where people were expecting to get this kind of, benefit from the eventual sale of the license. And this is not a license that was owned by Malabu. It was owned by Nigeria. Very curiously, Malabu was meant to pay $2 million, which is always the condition for every allocation. You are expected to pay a bonus amount. Right. Malabu was meant to pay $2 million of the signature bonus. That was not paid. It was only a deposit of $20,000 or thereabouts.
No, they were supposed to pay $20 million.
No.
And then
yeah,
we're
$20
told
million,
that
yes,
they paid $2 million.
$2 million, exactly. Thank you. So he was supposed to pay $20 million, and they paid just $2 million over the period until the balance was just paid in 2011. So under the expected regulation and policy, there was a deadline for you to pay the signature bonus. Failure to pay the signature bonus amounts to.
Sorry, let me. The question you asked, whether it was for genuine intention by the then administration, and then if you look at the history and all the intricacies that had played out with this Malabu OPL 245, you will discover that nobody had altruistic reasons for the benefit of Nigerians. Everybody wanted to get a share from it.
Even up to now?
Yes, up to the last minute that
I'm telling you. Yeah. So what's basically is playing out is, you discover that there's a huge, jar, of oil here, and some people cornered it to themselves. And then so, how do you, get a share of it? And so that's why, first and foremost, those that the Malabu, that the mining license was allocated to, it was done fraudulently. And then when the then government of Obasanjo also discovered, what did they do? They revoked and then awarded to where they could get benefit from. And then came Goodluck Jonathan. And then you hear Adoke saying, Attorney General of the Federation, saying, who is supposed to be advising the president on the position of the law, saying he was following lawful orders or instruction from the president, who we are supposed to be advising, who is, quote and unquote, not learned in law. And so if the instructions were contrary to the positions of the law, will you follow them as an attorney general at that level? And so what basically is playing out is, they came on board, yes, you hear that, yes, there was an out-of-court settlement. With who? With Malabu. On what ground were those out-of-court settlement? What were the terms? What was the foundation upon which Malabu claim was rested on? Is it a claim that would warrant Nigeria losing out? No, if looking at the details, but because everybody felt, Nigeria, oil is ATM for some people. And so that is why over time you hear any president that want to take petroleum ministry, superintend the petroleum ministry himself. And so all of those are things that played out.
There seem to be...
It's as if there's an unwritten law between this government and the previous one that, oh look, don't touch the president, but you can investigate every other person around them.
I get your point. There seem to be a lot of versions of this story. The Adoke you mentioned was allegedly quoted to have said that the advice he gave was to ensure that Nigeria wasn't fined, by another international organization and all of that. However, this oil field is a subject of controversies that is not only limited to Nigeria. There are about other 4 countries that are listed. But let's look at what happened last year in September, where a Nigerian and his accomplice in Italy were sentenced to 4 years each for their roles in the controversial Malabu oil deal. It's 20 years now. Why is it taking forever for us
Suraj, if
to have a closure?
If that advice was to ensure that Nigeria was not fined, why are these other countries jailing people who participated in this fraudulent transaction, except Nigeria and except the people who saw that advice that Nigerians should not be fined? We're not talking to laymen.
You see, so flowing from where it stopped in 2011. So we would not be. This is actually going to be a talk that will take like 3 hours for you to understand it, but just cutting it. When the deal was struck in 2011, Adoke does not have any business to have been that deeply and heavily involved, much less to have been answering to the instruction of the president. It's usually a transaction of the Ministry of Petroleum Resources. But because of the pecuniary and personal benefit of quite a number of them, Adoke then became the spokesperson, such that he was the one writing to the director in NNPC and DPR to ask for even opinion on the terms that were agreed, the PSA that was agreed and the resolution agreement between Shell, Eni, Nigerian government and Malabu. The DPR director wrote, may his soul rest in peace, the man is dead now, wrote to say this whole agreement is prejudicial to the interest of Nigeria. It was in black and white. That was told to Adoke. So like he said, if you're the chief law officer and you got that opinion, let us even agree that he is ignorant of his law that is meant to protect in the office. But somebody wrote that this is prejudicial to the interest of, they still went ahead to sign it. And it was signed rather than the money paid into the consolidated revenue account of the federal government of Nigeria. It was paid into an illegal escrow account opened with JP Morgan Chase Bank in the name of the federal government of Nigeria. Within few months, there was an attempt to send that money to an account opened in Switzerland. The bank rejected it and said, no, we can see the name of Danny Tete associated with this. And as at that time, Tete was already convicted in France for money laundering. They also attempted to send it to Lebanon, as you would want to say, secretive as the Lebanese banking system is. They also rejected the money and said, no, we can see a felon here. We don't want to get involved. That money eventually came to Nigeria and disappeared into thin air of buying private jets, of buying. This was money paid into that account, So when you look at the time, the investigation, and I must give kudos to the EFCC. EFCC actually assisted what you see happening in Milan currently with the trial, because the money movement in Nigeria was successfully traced by EFCC and identified all the people that were involved, to the extent that even an official of ENI in Nigeria got a $50 million cash as part of the bribery scheme, and that money was moved in cash.
There's a lot of money to be thrown
Moved
around.
out of Nigeria.
Nigeria will not be fine.
But then let's look at the role of the international community in all of this. He mentioned, what many people now applaud, what they call the Milan conviction. But the Nigerian government had filed a case against JP Morgan Chase in New York for $875 million due to the company's negligence in all of the transfers. How effective do you think this has been over the years? The role of these other countries in ensuring that justice.
You see, it's good that issues like these come up, but unfortunately, just like the semen scandal, when semen Ali Button, when all the actors in other countries in the West are convicted. Are still walk tall and patrol the corridors of power. And so, that's why I say that it is good that issues like this are coming up, because at the end of the day, you see responsible countries take steps to ensure that the matters are investigated with the collaboration of investigating agencies here. And then people who are culpable, are brought to book to serve as a deterrent to others who would want to do transactions with countries like this, especially in Africa. But the question here is, we keep going back and forth here in Nigeria, over the same issues that, you probably would have expected that, would have cleared up by now. But it's very, very unfortunate, quite unfortunate, because as I speak to you now, it's the actors here. When you listen to some of the actors involved in this, you hear them talk, you begin to wonder if they think they are talking to children. In some cases, let me start with the issue of the Attorney General. I'm very particular about the Attorney General because, as a lawyer, I know the respect and the enormity of the responsibility placed on the office of the Attorney General and Minister for Justice. Especially as Minister for Justice to the government, you're responsible to every legal advice that goes to the government. In these other countries that you mentioned, do you know that you can't be held liable for giving wrong advice to your government? But here, you give wrong advice, you say you were following lawful orders. And that's why the Nigerian government would be bold enough to say, JP Morgan's, because of your culpability, this is money meant for the federal government. How you release such funds to private individuals, we want to know. And so we want, we're suing for damages. If you were here, all you will hear is that we're following lawful orders. And that's also, I tell you, with that matter, and eventually might end up, with settlement, because they look at the books and then they will definitely find out that they were culpable at some point. And not the defense of, yes, we're following lawful order. And then they might settle out of court because if care is not taken, it might affect their shares and it might even affect the company. And so that's where I would want, Nigerians, all of us collectively, irrespective of our political affiliations and divide, these monies are monies that are meant for our everyday lives. We're complaining about policing, about debts of infrastructure. Do you know what this money that have gone into private pocket that people have used to buy private jet, do you know what it would do in the life of the average Nigeria? And so we shouldn't condone irresponsibility. And do you know also that if the moment you are appointed as a public officer, a higher responsibility is placed on you. And if you if you act contrary to that responsibility, the people should revolt, not just taking you to court. We should revolt against such persons.
So-
So in all of this, to round up, really, because I feel very sad. Anytime I hear this Malabu deal, I was like, so these people are still walking tall. You know, how do you as an attorney general or a former attorney general that have handled a transaction, how do you become a consultant to a party in the matter, even after you have left office? You know, so there are so many people down the line. There are so many people that have benefited from this chain. But you find out that the EFCC would want to, you know, hold the bigger alleged thieves.
Recall that in 2017, the House of Reps had asked former President Goodluck Jonathan to appear before it in its investigation of the OPL 245. But everyone is talking about the money that changed hands. Help us understand what's happening on that particular oil field. Has oil ever been explored, or are we still sitting on that 9 billion barrels of crude oil and the energy that is able to settle us for life?
Interestingly, you know, we're yet to actually exploit the oil. And there's been some very sadly surreptitious move, and I'm bold to say this, between especially the Attorney General and also the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, in an attempt to retain the license for ENI and Shell to continue the exploitation. And there's been so much talk in terms of saying, oh no, okay, so we should go for out-of-court settlement. And we should actually also give some measure of credit to the president, you know, Buhari, for insisting on saying no, we shouldn't go that way. Let's have the prosecution process concluded before we want to go into any form of negotiation. I mean, the Attorney General went as far as reckless as writing to the president to say, you know, the prosecution in Nigeria should actually be stopped. And this was at a time when the same Attorney General was in court against JP Morgan Chase in London. It was actually in London, and my organization and some of our partners were instrumental to that process, because what we did was to do a deep independent investigation and show some of the laws and policies and guidelines under the UK financial system that requires that JP Morgan Chase should have exercised some fiduciary responsibility in terms of checking with the red flags. Like I said, you know, made an attempt to pay to Switzerland, the money was rejected. Under normal circumstances, it was enough reasons to have stopped the movement of the money. The same thing with Lebanon. So now the oil field is still there, and that was why we're in court to actually say no. The allocation even and sale to ENI in 2011 cannot stand under the law.
Let me hold you for a minute, and we'll be back after this break to discuss this. But you mentioned the Attorney General. His position has always been clear. He has expressed doubt that the continued court challenges over the issue will have... he's not sure whether that will have any positive results for the federal government and several exports of oil. But we'll talk more about that in a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. The Malabu oil deal scandal is in the news again, and I have two gentlemen here with me. Larry Serratus, Chairman, Civil Society Network Against Corruption. Thank you for staying the course of the program. Liberos Oshoma, lawyer and public affairs analyst. It's glad to have you here always. We're opening the phone lines for you to be a part of the program, and all you need to do is check out the phone number on your screen. So you mentioned earlier the position of the Attorney General in this matter. You recall that the appearance in Milan, we had two lawyers claiming to represent the Nigerian government's interest, both of them requesting opposing beliefs. So the issue caused uproar, and it appeared to support the Nigerian Attorney General's position that the Malabu saga is becoming an embarrassment for the federal government.
No, I think it is not the Malabu saga. It is the Attorney General that was becoming an embarrassment to the Nigerian government, to Nigeria as a nation, and to Nigerians for each and every one of us. I remember when that case happened in Milan. I was there in Milan, and I was so much also really embarrassed, you know, to be seen even there in court as Nigerian and being from Nigeria. And it was all the fault of the Office of the Attorney General, where the appropriate instruction was not directed through the Minister of Justice to the ambassador in Milan. There was supposed to be, I mean, which is the channel of communication, because the ambassador in Milan is actually considered by the Italian system as the representative of Nigeria, not even the attorney, not the minister. It is just either the president or the ambassador. So it only carries the power from the ambassador. And they waited for the Office of the Attorney General to send that letter. And that letter and communication was not done until about a day or 2 days to the appearance in court. And that was at the time when the ambassador, with the approval from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, had already, not to lose the window of appearing as an injured party, which would entitle Nigeria to also make claims against the companies to be lost. That is number one. Number two, so when you get here into Nigeria, you would see there were 2 letters that had been written by the Attorney General to the President trying to actually, and that was actually shameful. Unfortunately, you wouldn't know what is holding the President back, you know, from sacking the Attorney General from office before now, because that was more than enough embarrassment. So the Attorney General sued some of the courts in London, the companies, including JP Morgan Chase in London. The Attorney General appeared in court in Milan to try and also claim damages, in this case, against the oil company and operatives and officials of the oil company. There was a case that was filed by lawyers representing the Nigerian through the Office of the Attorney General. Nigeria already got $73 million from UK as part of the remnant of the leftover in London. Under that, in the process, the Attorney General wrote on behalf of Nigeria, as part of the submission, that that money was a proceed of a criminal process, and also the transaction was actually ridden with corruption, only to come to Nigeria. And that goes to what we have, the challenge with our lawyers, you know, in Nigeria, and the practice here. The lawyers, if they were to be practicing in London or in Milan, should be in jail by now for the positions they held in terms of that transaction and the practices in court as well. You know, and that's why he said you can also be held liable for the advice that you give in some of these transactions. So the Attorney General has inconsistently, but you can understand, the lawyer who was representing Adoke in court when he was challenging his prosecution, but he didn't actually go to challenge the prosecution with the FCC, but he went to go and sue the Office of the Attorney General in court to say that he should not be held liable. Unfortunately, EFCC was not charging, or is not charging him for the decision he took, but for the money that went into his account. 500 million naira was also traced to him. So the lawyer who was representing Adoke was the same lawyer who represented Malami against the National Assembly when Malami was to go to court to say that. And for the first time, the letter written by the current Attorney General to the President was appearing in court and public domain, was when that lawyer tendered it in court. You know, interesting. And these are really serious cases that were supposed to be also professional misconduct for him to have used that letter, whatever way he got it, to have used it in court because it was not directed to...
I get your point, Mr. Suraj, but you know, the most interesting part of this is that all of this money that we're talking about is nothing compared to the, you know, the capacity of the oil field and the potential that it reserves. So one would think that, can't we just skip all of this and then get to the oil field and make some more money? Yeah, but let's take this call very quickly and I'll be back to you from Kwara. Good morning, Mohammed.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Welcome. Please go ahead with your contribution.
Okay. I think the Attorney General of Nigeria is doing a great job for us. Hello?
Well, with you. Please go ahead.
The Attorney General of Nigeria is doing a great job for us because since the independence, the attorney generals that you have been getting, you have never get any type of this attorney general this time, the one we are having this time around. Please, I want you to keep it.
It's all right. I think you made your point there. Thank you for your contribution. So I'm concerned about that. Is it possible that we skip all these issues and then get to the real issue, which is the potentials that this field has for our economy as a nation?
Let me use a layman's analogy on this. You have a pot of clean water underneath the ground, and you have a heap of garbage on top of it.
That you have to clear first.
Do you say, oh, then let's just get to the water and leave the garbage? You need to clear out all of the garbage before you get to the water.
It's 20 years now. How long more do you see this?
If you don't, you see, if we want to clear all of this, if we are genuinely interested in clearing it, it won't take more than a year or two. But because there are a lot of interests and intrigues and a lot of, you know, here, there are people who are greater than the law. And ordinarily, law regulates society, no matter your positions. Once you run foul of the law, the instrumentality of the law is immediately activated against you. But here, depending on the name that you carry and the tag that you once bear, you know, once it happens, people begin to find excuses around it. And that is why you hear or you see that the windmill of justice begins to grind slowly here. And the people that intentionally, you know, delay the process of justice will turn around to tell you that since the process is taking too long, why don't we just abandon it, jettison it, and then let's go to the main issue, because it's becoming an embarrassment. Nigerians actually created that embarrassment. People from here brought that embarrassment upon us. Until we clear it, only God knows how many of such embarrassment are there that have not been uncovered. Until we clear it and actually learn from the mistakes that, you know, were made in awarding that process. You might just award it, and 2 years down the line, you have a heap of litigation.
I understand your point about clearing the debts and getting to the clean water, but then there are two former presidents who are allegedly culpable in this matter. For instance, supporters of TVCTHISMORNING believe that he's been singled out largely because he's a member of the Ijo ethnic group, who are inhabitants of major oil-bearing territories in the country. Do we have the willpower and the capacity to actually clear this debt?
There's no problem about it. So before I quickly just round up that, let me also tell you why it's difficult to go on with the deal. We did what they call the economic evaluation of what was agreed in 2011. Contrary to the standard of what is called the production sharing contract that allows royalties, bonus, taxes, and whatever. What was designed in 2011 was called a resolution agreement, and it was not a production sharing contract. So within the resolution agreement, Nigeria is completely removed from profit oil. And that profit oil is supposed, within the lifetime of the oil block, is supposed to attract about $5.6 billion to Nigeria. So if you're saying we should forget about the crisis, let's just move on, it's meaning that we should forget about getting that $5.6 billion you know, from the deal, contrary to what should have been the standard practice. So it is not possible for us to move on with the deal. It is not just even the legal aspect, it's also the economic aspect of the contract. That is what we must move on. I've seen someone who also attacked me on social media and said, oh, you are a Yoruba boy, what is your business with our oil in the Niger Delta? It's our oil. So the person who stole it is from the Niger Delta. So it's none of your business. Okay. And we must be able to start the process of this reorientation for people to understand that I was in
let me just hold you for a minute. This particular controversial subject is involving the United Kingdom as well, and someone is calling from there. Good morning, Ola from Kent.
Morning.
Please go ahead with a contribution.
Yeah, it's sad that we are, you know, having to say all this, and unfortunately for some that work out here in the UK, and when you work with things that do with Nigeria, the kind of reputation you find yourself when people, particularly people that are Nigerians, that you the moment they see you, and you know anything that comes from Nigeria. Unfortunately, my side of this is I've been listening to the guests there and the individuals from Nigeria, and I want to believe this process will not complete without a foreign partner. maybe JP Morgan or whoever, all of those big companies. What role, how do they, because this seems to be put to the background, why the focus is so much on the Nigerians that sell all these things? We should then, because when the foreigners here want to talk, they only pick out the Nigerians involved in the whole transaction, the Nigerian officials, the Nigerian institutions. They don't so much focus attention on those who have helped them, wherever the foreign companies are. And attention should also be brought to the limelight. The same weight of persecution given to Nigeria should be given to them. Because as a Nigerian, when they see you as a Nigerian. But when people talk about JP Morgan, they never rob in whatever fraud that takes place in Africa. So when we are going, I know Nigerians have put this shame on all of us, but they can't complete it with their foreign help. So I don't know. The thing should also, they should not be left behind to make them look like, oh, we're just doing what's been asked to do. They are also part of this.
I think we get your point very clearly, Ola. So it's saying that not only Nigerians are corrupt after all.
But it's not. It also inform him. The trial in Milan is not even involving Nigeria, because there's like an OECD rule that says you can't try some of these public office holders when it matters to the issue of corruption like this. So Adoke is not involved. So Dan Atite is there. Abubakar Aliyu is there with Nigeria. But beyond Shell and ANI as companies, the former chief vice president of Shell is under trial in Milan. So he's been tried there. The current CEO of ENI is also under trial in Milan. And there's a trial that is also going to open very soon in the Netherlands against Shell and some of the individuals. These were on the strength of the petitions that we wrote to those companies. And the ones that are also going on, if you look at the warrant that was issued yesterday, it also had some Italian names that are there. So it is not just
but quickly.
I'll come to you, lawyer, but let's quickly take this call from Arochukwu, Abia State. Good morning, Okorafo.
Mazi.
Good morning, Mr. Mensemi. Good morning, I get in the studio.
Mazi, I greet you.
Good morning, sir. You see, this issue, this is what we are talking every day. This fraudulent allocation of oil prospecting license of 245 and the money laundering of $2.1 billion US. It's just same thing like oil that we are talking about this Malabu now. Now, when we look backward, the area of oil Gulf money. Now you ask yourself, all this money, both the oil Gulf money and this present one, if Nigeria is to gather such money right now, I think it will help us cushion this effect. We are talking about IMF loan and the rest. We are talking about the issue of now the question now is this: how will the federal government recover this money? Because going to extract and not to deficit. What we're supposed to do now as a country is let's look at the grassroots issue. What do I mean? The intricacies that have to do with all this, what do they use the money for? Where is the money? Because the money must also be part of Nigerian money here, that is in this country. But we're thinking about looking outside Nigeria. Let's look inwards. And if we look inwards, I bet we discover where some of these things are being logged in. Thank you very much. Have a pleasant day in Lagos.
All right, thank you for your contribution. Let me come to you now very quickly. Perhaps you want to respond to that.
Yeah, yes, the two, I'll take the two together. You find out that the same way I said that when it happens, it is always very swift and quick, overseas, for government over there to take responsibility and prosecute those that are culpable. But here, those that are culpable are walking around the corridors of power. And that's why when we discuss the issues like this, because those that are culpable overseas are already either on trial or in jail. And so justice has been served in those cases. You find out that we're discussing the issues and calling out names of those where justice have not been served. So that is why I look as if we're just calling the names of Nigerians who are involved and not calling out the foreigners, because some of them are on trial, some are already in jail. In some other cases, the Nigerian government had, like JP Morgan's, the Nigerian government has said, look, you need to refund this money back to us. It belongs to us. If you were negligent in transferring it to somebody else, we really don't care.
Your business.
That's your business. So And that process is already going. Just imagine if that had been in Nigeria. You know, the banks would have been filing preliminary objections,
Right.
you know, and the
You're
processes would have been
correct.
very...
Between the last 1 year, Nigerian government sued JP Morgan Chase. JP Morgan Chase appealed to Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal has decided in like 6 months.
I'm telling you, but
the case here for 2
but
years.
the one
3
here,
years.
but the one here, we're still even at the preliminary stage
Yeah.
and investigation.
Let's take this call very quickly from Kaduna. Good morning, Lamido.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning. Please go ahead with your contribution.
Yeah, I need to appreciate the two gentlemen with you. They're really doing a very good job.
Thank you.
To Mr. Suraj,
Yes, thank you.
I believe much is being expected from him. Because as for me, this Malabu issue is even getting worse and worse beyond a common Nigerian man thinking. So, what should be the way forward? And how can the Nigerian government and individual societies and individual societies help in tackling this kind of issues? As the lawyer rightly said, such an issue, many are untold. So, now we are talking about Malabu. Before you know it now, another one will come up. How can Nigerian government and how can individual societies come up in order to help Nigerian government solve this kind of issue? Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your contribution, Lamido. Lamido is asking for the way forward. Recall what transpired with the Abacha loot, where we had to, where, you know, the foreign country had to tell us what to do with the money. There's also the trust issue of even when we get the money.
Do you know why? Do you know
where
why they
does it
would
go
dictate
eventually?
to you what to do with the money? Because of transactions such as Malabu transactions. Because where, in some cases, monies are recovered, and then those monies are transferred to Nigeria, and they find their way into private pockets. And so now you turn around to blame an institution in that government for even sending the money, you know. And so they will not want to be culpable in future. They will tell you, look, we'll only release this money to your one condition if you use it this way. If this money did not leave the shores of Nigeria in the first place, nobody will be dictating to you how to spend your money. And then to answer his question, thank God you have, you know, NGOs, and Suraj had done a great deal of job on this also. And also, individuals can forward petitions. If you can finance, you know, projects such as these. And so that we'll begin to hold government and our institutions accountable to because they owe us. We don't owe them.
Yeah.
When they come to you to beg for your vote, they give you promises. And so when they get there, you should have a checklist. If there is anyone that you do not agree with, you can raise the petitions and then let agencies begin to work. That's the only way we can clean the urgent table.
Let me take Comrade Ayo's call. He's been on hold. He's calling in from Oshobo. Good morning, Comrade.
Good morning, Ms. Emi. And good morning to our two guests in the studio.
Good morning, Comrade Ayo.
Nifemi, you see, I want to chip in something. If we really want to fight corruption, if what is on ground now is not favoring us, I am talking about our legal jurisprudence. If we have to change this from the defense being the one to prove beyond reasonable doubt, the onus of proving beyond reasonable doubt is on the defense. Because I don't think what is obtainable now is favorable to us. We have the position to prove beyond reasonable doubt. If what we borrowed and copied is not favorable to us, I think right now we overhaul our legal jurisprudence to be that the defense will be the one to prove beyond reasonable doubt. How did you get this money? How did you come about this? How did you get it? If we change that stack of our legal jurisprudence, I think it will work for us. Because corruption in Nigeria has become a normal norm. Everybody, from the small boy on the street to the big man in the office, believes that the normal style of life, if you don't steal government money, you cannot be well okay. So the point is, let us change our legal jurisprudence. let the defense be the one to prove beyond reasonable doubt, not the prosecutor.
I think you made your point very clear there, comrade, and we have to wrap up now.
Quickly,
I think I get this point.
Let me
Because
respond to that.
just
So that,
last year, while he was suspending the Chief Justice, the president himself showed his disappointment in the judiciary,
No, let's
referring to some judgments from the Supreme
let me
Court.
quickly, so that we don't run away with that impression. Because you think when you ask the defense to prove beyond reasonable that it's only about big criminals like this. You're also referring to the everyday man on the street, who the police is already killing, even without allegations. Because once that happens, once you drive a car, the police arrest you. They say, look, you have to prove beyond reasonable doubt how you got this car. In these countries, apart from France, in Netherlands, in England, in all of these countries, it is the onus is on he who alleges. And they are getting convictions. So why are these people getting convictions and the same system is not working here? What you have are institutional failures. What you have are a system of rentiering where, rather than employ those that would do the job, you employ those who you know whether they are capable of doing the job or not. And in some cases, even the institutions are not empowered to do what they need to do.
It's all right.
And so when you have all of that, there's bound to be a collapse. And then you begin to hold on to straws as if that will be the solution.
Let's take our last caller on the show. Good morning, Undubisi. You have just 30 seconds.
Okay. I just want to ask, right on the screen I'm seeing, somebody was seeing 2.1 and now it's 1.2. Right on the screen.
Yeah, apparently, even we are confused, with the figures. But what we know is that $1.3 billion thereabout was paid, and a part of it was what they call the signature bonus, and $1.1 billion was the real amount given to Malabu by Shell and ANI.
Okay. Then I want to ask, if this money is eventually recovered, to what extent will this, will the federal government put the money? Bearing in mind that just some time ago, $300 and something million was refunded to Nigeria, and they were instructed to use the money. But the federal government equally turned back to tell us that they were going to be paying 5,000 naira to individuals in Nigeria. And at that point, the money, nobody heard about it, and that was the end. If this one is eventually recovered, where is the federal government of Nigeria going to invest this very money
That's all right.
that it will affect somebody that is like me?
Yes, that is watching the program right now. I think you made your point very clear. That's how much time we can have. Let me just have your final comment on this issue very briefly.
I think the point is that, like Liberal said, we must engage the government. It is not the government dictating for us what we should do or what should be done. It should be the other way around. We should be the one saying, we want investment in health. And that is where it should go. We want in education. This is, unfortunately for what he said, the money when the $323 million was coming, the government was asked, what are you going to do with this? And World Bank was also part of the process between, I was there in DC when World Bank, Swiss government and Nigerian government signed the agreement. And it was meant to go to the social intervention program.
The poorest
from
of the
the
poor.
original, exactly. So,
gentlemen, we have to peg it there. Larry Suraj, Chairman, Civil Society Network Against Corruption, thank you very much for your in-depth analysis. Liberal Oshoma, it's always a pleasant time with you on television. All right, so 2 years after AFCC revisited the case, it's gotten a court order now for the arrest of a former Minister of Petroleum and former Minister of Justice. It's 20 years on. The big question is, how long more are we going to wait for this puzzle to be solved? I am Nifemi Oguntoye. We'll be back tomorrow, God willing. Thank you for joining us.